Hi everyone, this is Heather Lottinen from the Flourish Academy. This is episode 496. Today I'm talking about shutter speed on my Fuji X-T3, but I'm wondering if this applies to other mirrorless cameras as well. I suppose it depends on how you change the shutter speed on those cameras. So one of the things that drew me to the Fuji, specifically the X-T3, were the dials in order to change all of your settings for the exposure triangle. So we have the ISO dial, the shutter speed dial, and this lens has an aperture ring. This is the 50 to 140, which is the 70 to 200 2.8 equivalent, because this is a cropped sensor camera, which is meaningless to me. It doesn't matter to me, crop sensor or full frame. These cameras are amazing. Okay, I am very tactile. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. Setting my exposure settings on these dials thrills me to no end because they're not menu driven. So for instance, if I put the ISO, shutter speed, and aperture all in A, I'm obviously in auto mode. If I do nothing else but change the aperture ring to the aperture I wish, which is usually 2.8, I'm now in aperture priority. If I put the aperture ring back to auto and change the shutter speed, I am in shutter priority. But I don't know how well you can see that on the shutter speed dial right here, shutter speed dial. There are numbers on that dial. So, numbers like, well, there's A for auto, 8,000, which is 1/8,000th of a second, 4,000, etc., all the way down to 1 second. But they can't possibly list all of the shutter speeds on this dial. There are more shutter speeds than what we're seeing here. For instance, what if I want 1/50th of a second or 1/40th of a second? Or 1/640th. Those numbers aren't on here. This is kind of embarrassing, but I didn't know how to change it. I thought to myself, well, that's not right. What if I don't want that shutter speed and I have to make that big jump? So obviously I looked in the manual and determined that you can put this dial, okay, A is for auto, the number is for the actual shutter speed, and B is for bulb, which means you can open and close the shutter at will, no time, meaning you don't set a time. And then there's a T. So I put it on T for time, and then I can use my back command dial in order to change the shutter speed. Now when I look through here, or I'm just looking at my live view on the back, I can spin my command dial, and sure enough at the bottom it says SS for shutter speed, and it's changing. It only took me, I don't know, 9 or 10 months to figure this out. In my defense, I just never put in the effort to looking it up because it was working for me. I would just set the shutter speed. Or, more often than not, to be honest, I'm in aperture priority. So shutter speed wasn't really an issue for me. I was leaving it in auto. But then the other day I was photographing, it must have been Camera Club, and I was like, wait a minute, I don't want 1/500th of a second, but I don't want 1/1000th of a second. And those were the increments on the dial. And I just wasn't sure how to change that. Well, there's a setting on here called T. Now, I know that Nikon is not like this. Nikon is menu driven, meaning it's a command dial and you can see the settings. I'm not sure about Canon. I'm not sure about Sony, Panasonic, but for any Fuji users who are like, wait a minute, I want more choices than I see on the dial, just set it to T and then use the back command dial to change it, and you should be all set. I hope that you found this useful. I'll see you in the next video.